Imagine for a moment that you are the CEO of a massive manufacturing company. You make steel, chemicals, or cars, the heavy industrial backbone that built the modern world. Your factories are in Germany, the economic engine of Europe, a country synonymous with precision, efficiency, and engineering dominance. But it's 2023. You walk onto the factory floor and it's quiet. Not because demand collapsed, not because workers are striking. It's quiet because you literally cannot afford to turn the lights on. Welcome to the Energiewende, the energy turnaround. Germany's grand experiment to lead humanity into a future of wind, solar, and guilt-free electricity. Germany spent more than $500 billion trying to engineer this green miracle, $500 billion. And what did they get in return? The highest electricity prices in the developed world, an accelerating de-industrialization crisis, and one of the darkest ironies in modern energy history. Wind farms are being dismantled to expand coal mines. This is not a freak accident. It is the result of hubris, geopolitical blindness, and panic layered on top of one another. This is the most expensive unforced error in modern economic history, and its consequences are only beginning to unfold. To understand how Germany reached this point, you have to go back to 2010. The iPhone 4 was new, people were still doing the Dougie, and Germany was in a remarkably strong position. Under Chancellor Angela Merkel, a trained physicist with a PhD in quantum chemistry, Germany had extended the lifespan of its nuclear power plants. At the time, nuclear supplied roughly 25% of Germany's electricity. It was clean, stable, zero carbon, and cheap. The plan made sense. Use nuclear as a bridge while renewables scaled up gradually over decades. Then, on March 11, 2011, an earthquake off the coast of Japan triggered a tsunami that struck the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant. It was a tragedy, but it occurred 5,000 miles away in a seismically active region involving a 40-year-old plant design. Germany, notably, does not have tsunamis. Logic would suggest a safety review, maybe infrastructure upgrades. Politics, however, is not about logic. It's about fear. The anti-nuclear movement, fueled by the Green Party, seized the moment. Protests erupted. Public opinion flipped overnight, and Merkel, despite her scientific background, made a political pivot. Days after Fukushima, she announced the Atomausstieg. Germany would shut down all nuclear reactors by 2022. 8 was switched off almost immediately. Click. Gone. 17 reliable, paid-off zero-carbon power plants were scrapped before their replacements existed. This was the original sin of the German energy crisis. The consequences were immediate and brutal. Germany wasn't adding new capacity. It was spending enormous sums just to replace power it already had. Massive subsidies poured into renewables through the Renewable Energy Sources Act, paid for by surcharges on every electricity bill. Prices soared to nearly 3 times the US average. And despite hundreds of billions spent, Germany's carbon emissions barely declined for nearly a decade. Why? Because when the wind didn't blow and the sun didn't shine, which happens frequently in Northern Europe, the nuclear plants couldn't be turned back on. So Germany burned lignite coal, the dirtiest fossil fuel on Earth. In a grim twist of logic, the country shut down its cleanest baseload power to save the environment and replaced it with the sootiest rock imaginable. Having crippled nuclear, Germany needed a backup. Wind and solar are intermittent. When dark, windless days, Dunkelflaut, arrived, the grid still needed power. Coal was politically toxic, so Germany turned to natural gas as a bridge fuel. It burned cleaner, ramped quickly, and was essential for industrial heat. The problem was supply. Germany didn't have much gas of its own, so it turned east. For decades, Germany pursued a policy called Wandel durch Handel, change through trade, the belief that economic integration would liberalize Russia. Cheap gas would flow, war would be unthinkable, and everyone would win. This philosophy gave birth to Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2, pipelines pumping Siberian gas directly into German industry. By 2021, 55% of Germany's natural gas came from Russia. The entire manufacturing model, BASF, Bayer, Volkswagen, was built on the assumption that cheap Russian gas would never stop flowing. Warnings poured in, Poland warned them, Ukraine warned them, the Baltic states begged them to stop. Even in 2018 at the United Nations, Donald Trump bluntly warned that Germany would become totally dependent on Russian energy. The German delegation laughed. 4 years later, Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine, And the laughter ended. When sanctions hit and gas flows were throttled, prices didn't rise. They exploded. Spot prices surged by up to 1,000%. Energy bills that were once manageable became existential threats. Factories saw monthly costs jump from $1 million to $10 million overnight. No business can absorb that, and customers won't pay it when they can buy steel from China or the US. The government scrambled. Utility giant Uniper was bailed out for $30 billion. Hundreds of billions more were spent subsidizing household energy bills to prevent social unrest. Germany had shut down nuclear, alienated fossil fuels, and built its industrial system around a supplier that had become an enemy. The trap had snapped shut. The real cost of this energy trap isn't measured in utility bills. It's measured in factories shutting down and industries leaving forever. Look at Ludwigshafen, home to BASF, the largest chemical producer on Earth. This single site consumes as much natural gas as all of Switzerland. For decades, it transformed cheap Russian gas into fertilizers, plastics, and chemicals that fed the world. In 2023, BASF announced permanent downsizing in Europe. Thousands of jobs were cut, plants were closed, and where did the investment go? China. BASF is now building a $10 billion complex in Zhanjiang. Because energy there is cheap and policy is predictable, they are not alone. Miele moved production to Poland. Volkswagen is eyeing North America, chasing US subsidies. Economists call this structural change. In reality, it's de-industrialization. Germany doesn't have Silicon Valley, it makes things. When the ability to manufacture competitively disappears, what remains is a beautiful museum with excellent beer. As BASF's CEO bluntly put it, Europe is becoming uncompetitive. That's corporate code for we're leaving before it gets worse. Then there's the grid, where the dysfunction becomes almost absurd. Germany's wind power is concentrated in the north, while factories sit in the south. Connecting them requires massive transmission lines. The flagship project, Suez Link, was supposed to be finished by 2022. Instead, lawsuits and local protest forced the cables underground, tripling costs and delaying completion until at least 2028. The result is grid congestion bordering on farce. When wind turbines in the north spin furiously, there's no way to send the electricity south. To prevent blackouts, operators shut the turbines off. But the producers still get paid. In 2022 alone, congestion costs hit $4.2 billion. Consumers paid for electricity that was never delivered, then paid again for coal and gas plants to fill the gap. This ghost electricity is the hidden tax of the Energiewende, quietly draining households while achieving nothing. By 2023, the government needed another win, so it targeted home heating. The new heating law effectively banned new oil and gas boilers, pushing heat pumps instead. The technology works, but mostly in modern, well-insulated homes. Much of Germany's housing stock is old, drafty, and incompatible without massive renovations costing tens of thousands of euros. The policy rollout was a disaster. Pensioners panicked. Approval ratings collapsed, the far-right surged. The law was watered down, but not before consumers rushed to install new gas boilers, locking in fossil fuel use for decades. It was a masterclass in how not to govern. Officially, emissions fell in 2023 to a 70-year low. The government declared success. The truth was darker. Emissions dropped because factories shut down. Energy-intensive production collapsed by nearly 20%. Germany didn't decarbonize, it de-industrialized. Meanwhile, having shut down nuclear, Germany's grid became far dirtier than France's, which runs mostly on nuclear. A German electric car is charged with electricity up to 8 times more carbon-intensive than a French one. The supposed green leader became one of Europe's biggest polluters. By 2025, the verdict is clear. The German economy stagnated. The industrial model is broken, political trust is fractured, and the world is watching, not to copy Germany, but to avoid it. The lesson is brutal but simple. Energy policy cannot be built on ideology. It must obey physics, economics, and reality. Germany spent $500 billion to learn that lesson the hard way. The rest of the world would be wise to learn it for free.